I'm Don Tess, better known as the Dawn of Beer.
And I am the one and only M. Sauter, better known as Pints and Panels.
Welcome to episode 39 of the All About Beer podcast. Every 2 weeks, we talk with leading experts and take a deep dive into one topic in beer. This week on the show, we're going to talk about biotransformation, the next level in producing juicy tropical beers. Please visit allaboutbeer.com and follow us on social media at allaboutbeer. And please visit patreon.com/allaboutbeer to support this show and others. So, Em,
Yes.
what do you think of biotransformation?
To be honest, I've done a lot of research about it and I still don't really understand it. So I'm really excited to learn more and hopefully fully grasp what biotransformation is and how it affects beer.
Yeah, that's just exactly why we have this show, right?
Yes.
So we have two guests today, and they're going to teach us everything we need to know and understand to appreciate biotransformation. But first, if you would like to help support the All About Beer podcast, please reach out to podcast@allaboutbeer.com. Speaking of supporting the show, here's a word from our sponsors.
This is John Hall, the editor of All About Beer, and this episode of the podcast is brought to you by Estrella Galicia. And I'm joined by David Mato. He's one of Estrella Galicia's brewmasters, and we're talking about alcohol-free beers. David, welcome. And to start off, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about what the alcohol-free beer market is currently like in Spain.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Hello, John. So in Spain, we have low alcohol beer and 0.0 alcohol beer. We have this difference between them. The low alcohol beer is when the alcohol content is between 1 and 3%. And non-alcoholic beer or 0.0 beer is which contains only a small residual amount of alcohol, but must have less than 1% alcohol by volume to be labeled like alcoholic free. And we can continue using the word beer on the label, which is pretty nice.
That is. Can you guide us through the process of creating a non-alcoholic beer, how you all do it at Estrella Galicia?
Yes, certainly. Crafting a non-alcoholic beer involves special techniques to retain the flavors, which are very important in the final product, while removing the alcohol. So we use a technique called interrupted fermentation. We focus on maintaining the balance and full-bodied taste, ensuring that the experience is just as enjoyable as our traditional beers.
I like that. And it for you as a brewmaster, what about the taste? Is it remind you of full strength alcohol beer?
Yeah, taste and flavor are very important for us. So we carefully select ingredients and brew on a specific board. No, we make a specific board which ferment for between 12 and 15 hours before stopping the process through cooling, and then we blend this brew and 2 parts of this brew and 1 part of normal beer, and we give them a maturation of a week. Then we make a vacuum distillation of this blending, and it's a way to maintain the full body and some of the aromas of the normal beer. But as you know, through this vacuum distillation, the aroma thing is an issue now. Is something sometimes it's complicated to maintain it. But the result, we are very happy with the final result. Yeah.
I like that. Well, thank you. You're going to be back with me at the bottom of the show to keep this conversation going. But in the meantime, I'm going to encourage listeners to be on the lookout for Estrella Galicia beers where they live, and especially the 0.0 offering. And you can learn more about Estrella Galicia by visiting estrellagalicia.com. Attention brewers, registration for the 2024 Best of Craft Beer Awards is now open. Sign up today. Now in its 10th year, this is a BJCP-sanctioned event, judged by fellow brewers, professional judges, and industry leaders. Judged in Oregon, it's the 3rd largest professional brewing competition in North America, and it's a chance to have your hard work evaluated and rewarded. Use promo code ALLABOUTBEER to receive 10% off of your order. Don't delay. Register your beers today by visiting bestofcraftbeerawards.com/register. One more time, that's bestofcraftbeerawards.com/register.
Eric Abbott has a background in biochemistry and botany and has worked as a hands-on brewer. Eric joined Lallemand Brewing in 2017, where he has worked as an R&D associate, technical sales manager for Canada, and global technical advisor. In his current role of technical support manager, Eric coordinates technical content and works closely with R&D, sales, marketing, and new product development teams on a diverse range of projects. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so square one, what exactly is a biotransformation? And explain it like somebody on this show may have failed chemistry in high school.
I failed chemistry.
Okay, so in general, biotransformation in a general sense is any chemical changes that the yeast makes in the beer through its metabolism. So we are all familiar with biotransformation in a very general sense because the yeast, the most fundamental biotransformation reaction that it does is converting sugar into alcohol and CO2. That's a major part of metabolism during beer fermentation, but there's other metabolisms that happen in the beer as well. The yeast is able to convert sugar into alcohol and CO2. It's also able to convert other precursors into other metabolites as well. So the yeast has a very complex metabolism. There's thousands of different genes in the yeast, and it's interacting with the many different compounds in a beer wort in many different ways during fermentation. When people say biotransformation in beer, they're generally talking about hop biotransformation. So that's the conversion of non-aromatic aroma precursors in the beer wort into free aromatic compounds that contribute to the flavor and aroma of the beer.
Okay. So just so that we're all working from the same base here, I hear, and I'm not a chemistry person either, so I think I've heard terms like glycoside and I've heard terms like thiol. Like, what are these things and how do they relate to biotransformation?
Okay. So you mentioned terpenes and thiols. Those are the two major categories of biotransformation. They're different chemical classes, terpenes and thiols, and they have completely different flavor and aroma profiles and different yeast metabolism that affect those category of compounds. So I'll start with the terpene metabolism. Terpenes are the largest class of plant specialized metabolites. Plants produce a huge array of different chemical compounds that they use to interact with their environment through flavor and aroma and things like that. They don't have behavior like animals do. They can't get up and walk away. So they produce a huge number of different chemicals to interact with their environment. Terpenes is the largest class of plant specialized metabolites. They're produced in many different types of plants. In hops, they're produced in the tiny glandular trichomes, which are the little orange kind of powdery stuff that you see on the inside of a whole hop cone. That's basically a little oil pouch, and it contains a lot of terpenes. So some of these terpenes will be free and aromatic already in the hops. That's why they smell so nice. But some of them will actually be bound to a sugar molecule. And we call that a glycoside. A compound bound to sugar is a glycoside. Oh. When it's bound to sugar, it's not aromatic. It's used to kind of be stored and transported around the plant. But for brewing purposes, it's basically a reservoir of terpenes that can be tapped into by accessing metabolism of the yeast.
Okay.
So when the yeast interacts with the terpene glycoside, it is basically cutting the sugar off of the terpene so that the terpene can be released in its free aromatic form.
Right. And then maybe also fermenting the sugar into alcohol?
Yes, it would ferment the sugar as well.
Okay. I sort of led you with, glycoside and terpene and thiol, but are there any other terms in biotransformation that we need to understand?
Well, for thiols, we talk about cystinylated or glutathione-linked precursor. So instead of a sugar being bound to the thiol, It's a amino acid linkage, and through different types of enzymes, the yeast will also cleave off that precursor. They will cleave the precursor to release the free thiol. In terms of different language we use to describe this, for the enzymes involved in terpene metabolism, we call that beta glucosidase enzyme. The enzyme that will free thiols from its precursor is called a beta lyase enzyme.
Okay. Em, do you have any questions?
I'm like, my head is overflowing. But I feel like now, like, there's a lot, you've done a really good job of kind of, I'm starting to get there. There's just, when science words enter my ears, they like immediately disappear. So but no, this has been really, really interesting. And I'm like, it's so fun to see the science aspect, even though I don't particularly understand it, the science aspect of beer, because, I don't know, it's just very cool.
I
So
like it too. Yeah.
yeah. Well, Don's a big nerd, so but I did have a question. So now that like people know more about this, are breweries starting to think about using their yeast differently? So if they're choosing a yeast strain based on esters and phenols, are they starting to think more about thiols or biotransformation?
So we're talking thiols, not phenols. Those are
Oh,
completely
sorry. Yeah.
different,
Yes, those are
completely different
see,
compounds.
this is me failing chemistry again and again through adulthood.
Phenols or phenolics are the kind
Yes.
of spicier clove
Yeah.
character
Yeah.
that you get in some yeast strains, but thiols are generally derived from the hops
Yes.
and freed by the metabolism of the yeast.
So I guess that's the question though. Like, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think biotransformation, or this idea of freeing hop compounds into free aromatics, is a relatively new concept, at least it is to me. So to the extent that brewers had been selecting yeast based on esters and phenols, are they now maybe thinking more about and making yeast selections based on its biotransformation and thiol ability?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeast producers are characterizing yeast producers are characterizing their yeast strains to determine which ones have higher activity of beta glucosidase, so terpene favoring, versus beta lyase or thiol favoring metabolisms. So certain yeast strains will be advertised as being high biotransformation, either for terpenes or for thiols, or sometimes for both. And brewers are adapting their processes and their ingredient choices to promote biotransformation. So whether that be from choosing hop varieties that are higher in either terpene or thiol precursors, choosing a yeast strain that is higher in beta glucosidase or beta lyase enzyme activity, or by potentially using what we call an exogenous enzyme, which basically means an enzyme outside of a living organism that has been extracted and purified, and that can be added separately from the yeast to allow the enzyme activity to proceed. So one example of this that we have is a aroma-zyme that Lallemand Brewing produces. It's a purified beta glucosidase enzyme that basically allows you to add the beta glucosidase, so terpene favoring metabolism, in a way that is separate from the metabolism of the yeast.
Okay. So you have different strains now that are what I'll call old school. They're good at making esters or whatever. And then we have these new, more biotransformative, if that's the right term, biotransformative strains. Is it just should brewers just be selecting one or the other, or would you suggest to brewers that they think about multiple strains in their ferments so that they get the best of both worlds, or a balance of things, or how should brewers be thinking about their
Yeah,
using
well,
these
it's
yeasts?
interesting that you talk about some kind of more traditional or ordinary strains versus say a more modern biotransformation strain. It's a little bit misleading to say that, because through our research we're actually finding that some of our more traditional strains, for example, the Diamond or Nottingham strains, they seem to have, at least in lab trials, a fairly high beta lyase or thiol promoting metabolism. And that's not something that we would have necessarily expected. People are not really tending to use the Diamond yeast. It's a lager strain to produce very hoppy beers, but
Yeah.
we're seeing a little bit more of that with cold IPAs, for example, or like modern hoppy lager styles. And Diamond would actually be a good choice, even though it's a classic strain that we've had in our portfolio for a long time now. But there are certainly newer hop strains that are released and specifically promoted for their biotransformation potential as well.
Okay.
Oh, so everything's
Um,
old is new again. So you can
Yeah,
kind
I
of,
love it.
yeah.
yeah, being characterized in different ways.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. The characterization of these strains is actually pretty complex. The metabolism of these yeast, it is very complex, and there's many different compounds that they're interacting with. For terpenes, there's thousands of different terpene structures that are known. So what we're finding in some of our research is that we're finding that the chemical data that we get from measuring the concentration of terpenes or thiols doesn't always completely line up with the sensory panels, which is something that has been noted in published literature as well. So it's really difficult to fully characterize these strains in terms of their potential to actually do work in a commercial brewing environment or at a homebrew scale as well. There's some limitations to laboratory experiments. When we're studying thiols, measurement of thiol levels, thiols, they're a sulfur-containing compound. The sensory threshold is very, very low concentrations, and these compounds are present at very, very low concentrations. So they're very difficult and quite expensive to actually measure and quantify. And there's only a few labs worldwide that are able to do this, and it's very expensive analyses to do. So it means that although we are progressing with the research in the field of biotransformation, both related to terpenes and thiols, there's still a lot of work that can be done and that is being done in our lab and in other labs around the world.
Love that.
So cool. That's very, very cool. So is this purely the way that, I mean, I think about thiols and biotransformation, for me, it's all about hop aroma and flavor. But should brewers be thinking about biotransformation and to add other flavors to, like, say, any other styles, saisons, pilsners, anything? I mean, this could work with any beer.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, some saison strains or Belgian strains in general tend to be fairly high in biotransformation activity. Now, some of this will be covered up by the phenolic character that is present in many of these yeast strains. But if you're brewing a hoppy saison, you're going to likely see some biotransformation activity as well. Certainly, it could be used to promote hop character in any style. The problem is that it really only works in highly hopped beers. If there's not very many hops added to a beer, if it's not a very hoppy style, you're not going to have many precursors for the yeast to work with. So it's not going to be able to add more than the amount of precursor that was added in the hops in the first place.
Right.
It doesn't create anything. It just converts
Yeah.
the precursor into a free aromatic compound.
Right. It releases them, basically.
Right. It releases them, but you need to add it in the first place in the form of like a pretty big hop load.
Right. Awesome.
So for a pilsner, that would be anything with,
Yeah,
that would
you
be
could do a pilsner. Yeah.
Yeah, and dry hopped Pilsner, cold IPAs, things like that. But if you're doing a very light, low hop traditional Pilsner, you're not going to see very much biotransformation activity because there's simply not very many precursors that have been added due to the low hop rates. And this is probably why we didn't really notice very much biotransformation potential for our diamond lager strain in the first place, because traditionally it was used in very low hop beers.
Right. But it always had that potential that you've now
Yeah, it was
discovered.
always there.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you, Eric, for taking this very complicated subject and making me understand it, which is awesome. Love it.
My pleasure.
Eric, if people want to keep up to date with your research and Lallemand, what are social media handles that people should follow and or your website?
Website is lallemandbrewing.com. I can't remember exactly the specific handles, so it's probably best to just go to our website, but you'll find all of our links to social media there as well. But it's Lallemand Brewing. You'll be able to find us on also all social media platforms, whether it be LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and we also have an app that you can download as well, where we provide some additional information about our strain, including a strain selector for any beer style, which is not actually present on our website.
Oh.
And for support, you can feel free to email brewing@lallemand.com. And those emails go to me, and we respond to everybody, whether you're a commercial brewer or a home brewer. And we love interacting with our customers.
And you even respond to nosy podcast co-hosts that email.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. Awesome. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Cheers.
Cheers.
And we'll be right back with Scott Janish of Sapwood Cellars to talk about using biotransformations in brewing. But first, a word from our sponsors.
Welcome to Estrella Galicia, where brewing excellence has been a family tradition since 1906. They are all about lager, rooted in German brewing heritage. Maintaining their commitment to tradition, they brew exclusively in their original brewery in La Coruña. Each beer boasts its own distinctive recipe, no shortcuts, no compromises. They shun high-gravity tricks and avoid additives even in their alcohol-free beers, and stick firmly to traditional methods. Their passion for beer sets them apart as they embrace and celebrate the art of brewing. At Estrella Galicia, they love beer above all things. Experience the difference, sip by sip. Attention brewers, registration for the 2024 Best of Craft Beer Awards is now open. Sign up today. Now in its 10th year, this is a BJCP sanctioned event, judged by fellow brewers, professional judges, and industry leaders. Judged in Oregon, it's the third largest professional brewing competition in North America, and it's a chance to have your hard work evaluated and rewarded. Use promo code ALLABOUTBEER to receive 10% off of your order. Don't delay. Register your beers today by visiting bestofcraftbeerawards.com/register. One more time, that's bestofcraftbeerawards.com/register.
Scott Jan co-founded Sapwood Cellars, a brewery specializing in hazy hop-forward ales and barrel-aged sour beers in Columbia, Maryland. He is also a beer researcher and blogger at scottjanish.com and author of The New IPA, Scientific Guide to Hop Aroma and Flavor. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thank you for having me.
So, as a brewer, how do you think about biotransformation?
Well, it's such a broad topic that can go kind of so many different angles or ways with it. Just as a brewer myself, especially when I was a few years ago, back when I was researching for the book, The New IPA, that was the one chapter that got me the most excited while digging into research. Mostly at the time, it was wine research, trying to see what strains, that yeast strains they've kind of put or have noticed are capable of bioconverting in wine. It's the same thiols that we're kind of chasing in hops, which is kind of interesting. So I did so many different trials just to try to get any sort of biotransformation using the science from the wine world, and their wine strains with a whole bunch of different beer test ferments, and just could never really get anything that was aligning with what the science in the wine world you would expect, the big tropical passion fruit flavors. The weird phenols from the wine ferments and stuff were really kind of dominating those early trials for me. Whether if there was biotransformation happening, it was being probably masked a little bit. So this is something I've been excited and chasing for a long time, but it wasn't until the bioengineered strains came out that these ferments really started to come way over the taste threshold, and now there's strains producing biotransformation at different levels that really lets brewers kind of dial in what they're after.
Like the Spinal Tap dialing it up to 11 kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you can just go. I mean, I think some of their early, I've worked mostly with Omega Yeast. They've been great and shared a lot of their test trials, test yeast strains with us at Sapwood, and we've done a lot of work analyzing those and brewing test batches with them. And just some of those early ones in particular were just so outrageously high in thiols. It was amazing that it was even beer. I mean, it was just so over the top that it was, you're just not used to impacts at that sort of level from a yeast strain choice.
What was it like? Were they actually tasting like wine then, or?
I wouldn't say wine in particular. It was very, to me, kind of a one note.
Oh, I see.
Very, very kind of passion fruit forward, but I wish I had a better term than this like thiol edge that they have. It's just this very high 3MH kind of flavor and aroma that I think once you get kind of keyed in on it, you can pick it out pretty easily.
Okay. So then that actually does bring me to my next question. It sounded like in the early days when you were experimenting, you were maybe wanting to maximize biotransformation, but now you're more thinking about nuance and balance and other flavors. So if you want to balance, those thiol flavors, how do you control how much biotransformation you get in a particular beer, and how do you think about other flavors and how they might play together?
Yeah, I mean, you're right in that. Like early on, I was just trying to get it to happen, period, and that would have excited me. I didn't think in 3 years we'd be able to do it with such precision. But for me, the balance kind of comes in. In fact, we actually just doing another run of beers at Sapwood with Cosmic Punch, Omega's kind of first strain, and the one on the lowest end of the thiol producing concentrations. And that's one that I like in particular, just because it does kind of allow for that the thiol character after fermentation, before dry hopping or doing anything with is definitely there. It's got this lighter kind of body to me that the grain doesn't come through as much, kind of takes that like toasty or doughy grain edge off of a beer in a way that like a typical English strain might leave. And it just allows for a brighter kind of hoppy beer, in my opinion. And you can use some of the science with a strain like Cosmic Punch, where you can pull some levers during the brewing process that will allow you to increase the final concentrations a little bit more, but still not be to the point that some of the strains that are on the top end, like the Helio Gazer, Lunar Crush, Star Party, those kinds of levels. It's not quite getting you there, but you can do things like mash hopping with mash hops that are high in these 3MH thiol precursors, or you can add other products like Phantasm to the whirlpool that increases more of those thiol precursors that a strain like Cosmic Punch can really work on, which gets you higher than you would with the strain on its own, but still kind of in that lower range from some of those intense strains. And it's just that's just an example, I guess, of how you can kind of pull some levers to get with where you're going with those.
With the current popularity of like juicy tropical, so you're like, how do you I know you're just talked about like process, but like how do people want juicy, they want tropical, they want these flavors. How does that change the way you're using this kind of stuff? Because like I'm not gonna lie, this is like totally you just mentioned a bunch of words and I'm like, those are some words.
Are they English?
Yeah. I was like,
That's
yeah,
my trip.
so
I don't know what they mean either.
yeah.
You know, I think that like the average beer drinker, like you said, is just kind of after, if they like a juicy IPA or hazy IPA, that's kind of what they want. They're not really concerned with, how you got there necessarily. But, for us, we kind of use these strains. One example, I guess, of this that I've really liked our beers is mixed ferm beers, which seems kind of not true to what a mixed fermentation beer is, but using this high thiol character going into barrels and just maintaining that over a long period of time gives you such a unique beer that you couldn't get otherwise in like that realm of brewing. Whereas if we're trying to go, like you mentioned, in the super tropical, juicy way, we could use a high thiol producing strain with a fruit of that kind. Like say you're doing a fruited sour and you use a high thiolized strain, then you could use potentially a little less of like, passion fruit is an easy one because it already kind of goes in that direction. You can kind of dial that back a little bit and maybe potentially use a little less fruit. And so you're getting kind of like free in quotes, kind of fruit character in a beer, like in a fruited sour. So, there's just so many ways you can kind of go with it. Strangely, the way, at least at Sapwood, we don't use it with very often is in a big juicy IPA. That's kind of where we just let the traditional method kind of speak for itself, and where that style kind of originated, it still kind of is. Having said that, we've done a few, I thought we did a beer with Tampa Bay Brewing Company that used Helio Gazer. I believe that beer was called Placebo Punch, with some Yakima Chief hop oils, and this combination of hop oils, dry hopping, and a high thiolized strain did create a very unique and fun, juicy IPA. So I guess it's kind of a long answer saying you can do so many different, you can go so many different angles with these strains, and that's kind of what makes them so exciting to experiment with.
You've spoken quite a bit about yeast, but what about other other ingredients? Like I understand that maybe aged rather than fresh hops might offer more thiol precursors, and I understand maybe some unusual grains have thiol precursors like spelt.
Yeah, I'm not sure the exact precursor content of spelt, but in general, it's the grains that aren't roasted as long is kind of my understanding that would have the most potential.
I see.
So yeah, using there's just so many precursors in like a pale malt that that's kind of how those strains on their own can produce so many free thiols, is just by converting those bound 3MH thiols during fermentation, which is also a thing that was definitely not on my radar back when I was experimenting with these. I would have never thought there'd be so many precursors in grain itself. But the other one is, like you mentioned, hops. And to me, the interesting thing there is a lot of the hops that have higher precursor content aren't the ones you would generally think to use in an IPA, for example. Like using Saaz is one that has a lot of thiol precursors, but of course that's not one you would generally use. And then using it in the mash, which is something we've always done at the brewery for more of a shelf life, science around shelf life, but now, utilizing, we just did a pale ale where we had Cosmic Punch that was the primary fermentation, and then it had a whole lot of like 2021 Saaz in the mash. So we're kind of loading up the precursor content We're using some older hops that, you could easily just leave on your shelf for a while until you don't know what to do with them and throw away. So that's a huge perk. And the other perk is, since saws is so low in alpha acid, especially if you're using aged saws, you're hardly adding any IBUs to your beer from this big mash hop addition. You're using older hops, which are cheaper, are generally cheaper. In fact, you can buy older hops for a good price. And the IBU contribution from that is so low, it's not really affecting your overall bitterness in the beer. And so it's just the ingredients really do kind of play a big part in those. And for us, I believe that for brewers out there, I think it's about 30% of the expected IBUs from a 60-minute addition is what you would get from a mash hop addition. So you can see why using a low alpha hop like saws doesn't do much but add flavor.
Right. So people should be looking for the double saws hopped juicy IPA.
Yeah, and I guess but obviously you wouldn't dry hop with the saws on that.
Right,
so
right,
it's more
right.
of just
I stopped myself. I was about to say dry hop, but a few minutes ago you mentioned phantasm, and I just wanted to, for people who don't know what phantasm is, can you just quickly tell us what that is?
Yeah, it's essentially, there's, if you've had Sauvignon Blanc wines from New Zealand, they can just be intensely passion fruit forward. And so, what Phantasm has done is taken essentially the skins of Sauvignon Blanc grapes after they've been used in the wine process and kind of made a dry powder. Is essentially what we have of the leftover grape skins from the wine process. So it's just it's essentially just what's left after winemaking, but what's on the skin still has enough of these thiol precursors that a biotransformation capable yeast strain can then convert into free thiols, which you would taste. So it's essentially like a powder of wine leftover skins, grape skins. So the great use of that product, and that's we've had a lot of luck with that. Again, that's another one we love to put into barrels. So using Phantasm in the whirlpool with something like Cosmic Punch, and then going into freshly emptied white wine barrels with mixed microbes for a good amount of time, like a year, close to a year, or even well over a year. And there's something to these high thiol beers where they just don't oxidize at a level that other beers do. Thiols themselves are very sensitive to oxygen, so perhaps those are uptaking the oxygen and leaving the beer a little fresher. But there is something to these aged beers with the high thiol hops that we really dig.
Oh, that is super interesting.
Yeah, I didn't even think about using Phantasm in a
barrel.
Yeah, that's mind blowing to me. That's cool.
Yeah, it's fun. In fact, there might still be some of the bottles floating around, but we did one with Bissell Brothers that was the same approach. So it was Hallertauer Blanc Phantasm in the whirlpool, aged it in fresh Sauvignon Blanc barrels. Bissell Brothers sent us some of their culture that we put in those barrels, and then we had a few with our own culture. And then after a year, then we re-fermented that with fresh Chardonnay local grapes from a vineyard in Maryland, Crow Vineyards, and then let that naturally condition in a bottle. And it's a unique, super unique beer that there's something to that thiolized strain that I think gets you something more complex than we would have gotten just using a traditional strain in that primary fermentation.
Very cool. So what advice would you give to home brewers or even like pro brewers about utilizing biotransformations to their advantage? Like, is there a way that, they can just buy the strains and use them, or is there any advice you'd give them?
I think as a home brewer, I would always appreciate when breweries around me, local breweries, would put out beers with some of these newer products. So you could kind of get a sense of, what a new hop product tastes like, or a new yeast strain tasted like, prior to spending your entire Saturday brewing a test batch with it, and then coming back 2 weeks later and spending another Saturday packaging that beer. So if you can get your hands on some local products that use some of these strains to kind of help formulate an idea of where you want to go with the beer, or you can just dive right in. I think just doing some ferments with the high thiol strains, and the most important thing I think is I think everyone's instinct is to dry hop these beers, but if you can really taste and think about what that thiol character is doing to the beer before dry hopping it, I think that's really where you'll learn the most about how you might want to utilize that character, because once you dry hop it, you're creating these more complex. It's just harder to know what that thiol character is doing on its own, and that's especially true for the lower strains like a Cosmic Punch that's not at such high levels. So just tasting your beer through the process, and amazingly, 24 hours in, if you taste the beer that's nowhere near done fermenting, but it's a high thiolized strain, that's almost when it's the most intense. It is pretty remarkable to smell what that high thiol character is doing. I don't know if it's because it's transformation I believe is happening in the yeast cell itself, and the yeast is in suspension, and maybe that's why we're smelling it. But yeah, I mean, even if you drop the yeast from a tank, the yeast itself has a strong thiol concentration.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Is there any online resources or anything you'd recommend home brewers or people like me who are scared of science, where they can can learn about utilizing these to their advantage?
Omega Yeast has a great newsletter now that I would recommend subscribing to, and if you go through some of their previous posts, there's quite a bit on thiolized strains. On my personal blog, I've done a few. They are probably a little more in that high science kind of category, but they're if you search, trying to think of what the name of the beer. We did a beer called the Locksmith. That was a collaboration with Omega and Phantasm. I have the whole recipe on there. That I think if you're just need a starting point to go from, that would be pretty helpful. So there's so many different podcasts. I think in the last couple of years, that's really been a topic of a lot of conversation. So there's a lot out there now.
You should write a book about this or something, Scott.
I know, it's just so frustrating. Not frustrating, it was exciting, but it's like after the book was released and it's like, oh, we figured it out.
You obviously everybody should drink as many Sapwood Cellars beers as they can, but are there any other broadly available, like nationally available beers you feel people should try to kind of understand biotransformation?
Yeah, and it's something that my business partner Mike Thompson and I say all the time is we really need to get out more and drink more beers from other places. We get kind of just so locked into our own little territory here, but I'm just not aware of one that's mass produced, and I'm sure there is one that I'm not thinking of or haven't heard of. Maybe someone listening to this could leave in a comment or something.
Yes,
but
yes, I would appreciate that.
But I think we've done a few. But they're just collabs with other breweries, and I don't think they get brewed multiple times after the fact. Toppling Goliath and Lua Brewing, we did a beer with. I believe that was definitely mass shipped out, but it was not probably rebrewed. So it's tricky. It's I guess a good place to look now is Tavour. If you live in a state where you can now, Tavour is an online app where you can buy beers and have them shipped directly to you. I believe you just buy singles. that is a way to find some thiolized beers from around the country that you could have shipped to you and try. I know that I believe our mixed fermentation club will be added to that soon, which will have some more of those barrel aged mixed ferm beers with things like Cosmic Punch that'll be included in there. And I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other great breweries in the U.S. that have similar beers on there.
Okay, cool. Thank you for your time, Scott. Before we let you go, very quickly, where can people buy your book and what are social media handles? And you mentioned your blog. Let everybody know how to get in touch with you.
Sure, it's just scottjanish.com. Not very clever or creative in that front. Social media wise, it's just also just at Scott Janish. But most of the focus now is really the brewery and not so much on, I wish I had more time to write blog posts and all that. So anything at Sapwood Cellars, I think, is where you'll see a lot of where the experimentation and kind of focus is going is probably better to follow those channels.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott.
Yes, thank you so much.
You. Appreciate the invitation.
So, do you understand biotransformation now?
Yes, I think I do.
I think that was great.
I mean, hey, you like it because it's nerdy, but I think when I think about thiols, terpenes, I think about those fruity beers, or I think about hazy IPAs. I didn't even think about barrel-aged beers, saisons.
Yeah.
It's got so much more utilization than I realized, and that was the coolest part for me.
It's another tool for the toolbox. Yes. And what I love about this is that beer is millennia old, and we're still learning such new things, like that diamond yeast that Eric was saying. It's always had this ability that we've just figured out in the last couple of years, right?
And now, because now with the creation of the cold IPA, my favorite style, it's really cool to see how old is new again. I love it.
Yeah, love it. I love it. Awesome. Please, everybody, visit allaboutbeer.com and follow us on social media at allaboutbeer. And please visit patreon.com/allaboutbeer to support this show and others. If you have questions for the experts, please email us podcast@allaboutbeer.com. That's also the email for feedback, suggestions, or to inquire about supporting this show through advertising. So, how can people reach out to you?
I am at Pints and Panels across all social media, and my website is pintsandpanels.com. How about you, Don?
I am at the Dawn of Beer on X, Threads, and Instagram, and people can drop me an email at don@thedawnofbeer.com. Here's a final word from our sponsor.
Attention brewers, registration for the 2024 Best of Craft Beer Awards is now open. Sign up today. Now in its 10th year, this is a BJCP sanctioned event, judged by fellow brewers, professional judges, and industry leaders. Judged in Oregon, it's the third largest professional brewing competition in North America, and it's a chance to have your hard work evaluated and rewarded. Use promo code ALLABOUTBEER to receive 10% off of your order. Don't delay. Register your beers today by visiting bestofcraftbeerawards.com/register. One more time, that's bestofcraftbeerawards.com/register. This is John Hall, and as promised, David Matto, one of Estrella Galicia's brewmasters, joins me again, and we're talking about non-alcoholic free beers. And I wanted to ask you about the growing demand for non-alcoholic options, David, and specifically, what trends have you observed in the market?
Yeah, absolutely. The demand of non-alcoholic beers has seen a significant increase, I think, in the last 20 years, driven by a more health-conscious consumer base. But I think it's important to know that Spain is the world leader in production and consumption of non-alcoholic beer. So this increase in Spain, it's maintaining during the last 4 years. People are looking for alternatives that allow them to enjoy a high-quality beverage without the effects of alcohol. So I think it's a worldwide trend to pass to the non-alcoholic beers. Yeah,
I like that. So regarding Estrella Galicia's non-alcoholic beers, Are there any particulars that you've seen become fan favorites? And what does the future look like? What are some developments that you all may have at Estrella Galicia for the future of the non-alcoholic beer space?
Okay, our Estrella Galicia 0.0 has been exceptionally well received. It's a non-alcoholic beer that embodies the essence of our brand, of our normal brand. We think that the balanced flavors and the refreshing profile have made it favorite among those seeking alcohol-free option. But it's also remarkable that in the last years, we started with the Estrella Galicia 0.0 Amber, where the malty notes take a center stage. And I think now it's winning in this fight without the normal brand, with the normal brand, sorry. And I think it's a favorite now, the Amber one. And
Nice.
for sure, I prefer it.
Thank you so much. We're going to stay tuned to the space, obviously. So thank you for being here, and thank you to Estrella Galicia for sponsoring this episode. Dear listeners, you can learn more. I was going to tell everybody that they can learn more about Estrella Galicia by simply visiting estrellagalicia.com.
This show is produced by All About Beer. Visit allaboutbeer.com for articles, notes on this show and others, and to connect by the newsletter and social media. Cheers.
Cheers, everyone. Drink cold
Free
IPAs.
the thiols.
Free the
what'd you say? Cold
thiols.
IPA.
Cold IPA, thiol. I don't even know. More
Yay.
words.